It started like any other promotional tour for Mark Wahlberg, dressed in a crisp navy blazer over a black tee. He stepped onto the Good Morning America set with the kind of relaxed swagger only a seasoned Hollywood veteran could manage.
That's the segment.
Was scheduled to spotlight his new faith-based action film and his recent business ventures, particularly his outspoken embrace of Catholic values, his gym empire, and his expanding tequila brand. Mark flashed his classic tight-lipped smile, shook hands firmly, and sat across from George Stephanopoulos, who, as always, exuded calm professionalism. But no one knew what even producers hadn't fully anticipated was that beneath George's welcoming posture was a line of questions that would collide violently with Mark's hardline stances. The opening 5 minutes rolled smoothly. Movie clips, light banter, nods to discipline, and early morning workouts. But then, George pivoted asking how Mark reconciles his promotion of religious values with running a liquor brand, or his comments about Hollywood's wokeness with his own troubled past. Mark's smile tightened. "Are you trying to call me a hypocrite?" he asked, tone half joking, half warning. George kept his composure, saying the public deserves clarity when public figures sell redemption while profiting off contradiction. Asterisk, that's when it snapped. Mark leaned forward, visibly irritated. "You ever been to prison, George?" he said sharply, referencing his well-known teenage arrest. "You ever had to rebuild your life from the ground up while the whole world called you scum?" The air in the studio turned electric. George didn't flinch. "No," he replied quietly, "but I also haven't turned my past into a brand that hit like a punch." "What?" Mark bristled, eyes narrowing. "You trying to shame a man for turning his life around? For making money the honest way?" George shook his head calmly. "I'm asking if you're selling redemption or exploiting it." The cameras kept rolling, but the tone was no longer morning show polite. Mark's hands were clenched. He fired back about media elites judging from pedestals, about journalists who had never built anything, and George replied that building empires on contradiction invites scrutiny. "You say you're about faith," George continued, "but you call Hollywood soft and woke, then go sell tequila at celebrity parties." Mark slammed his palm on the table, not loud, but firm enough to startle even the crew. "Don't talk to me about faith like you know anything about it," he growled. "You read a script. I live it." Asterisk producers now exchanged urgent glances in the control room. George maintained his poker face, but his next question drove in deeper. "So are you saying criticism is only valid if it comes from someone who shares your story?" Mark shot back instantly. "No, I'm saying people like you act holy until it's time to dig into someone real." George nodded slightly, then pressed. "Do you regret anything you've said recently about Hollywood actors being too soft, or America being too woke?" Mark laughed bitterly. "No, they are soft. You can't even say the word God in a script now without someone crying." George raised an eyebrow. "And yet here you are, making millions in that same industry." Mark fired back. "You think I'm in it for them? I'm in it for the people who still believe in grit, discipline, prayer." At that, George brought up a clip of Mark at a Las Vegas launch party, shirt slightly open, tequila flowing, loud music pumping. "Is that discipline? Or is that just branding?" Mark sat back, smirking with something bordering on contempt. "You wouldn't know real from branding if it punched you in the mouth." That's when the producer's voice finally came in over the earpiece cut to break. Asterisk, but before the cameras faded out, George asked one final question. "Do you think Jesus would endorse tequila?" That did it. Mark stood up. "I'm done," he muttered. "This is a joke." Crew scrambled, trying to keep the cameras rolling, unsure if this was still salvageable content or an outright disaster. George remained seated, hands folded, watching Mark step off set. "Thanks for your time, Mark," he said clearly, his voice measured, "and good luck with the film." Few awkward claps followed from the stunned in-studio audience. Behind the scenes, chaos erupted. Assistants trailed Mark as he stormed toward the exit, muttering curses and slamming a water bottle into a trash can. Back in the studio, George calmly transitioned to the weather segment, but everyone in the building knew this wasn't over. Social media was already lighting up, clips leaked by interns and whispered voice notes being sent to entertainment blogs. Mark Wahlberg stormed off GMA became the phrase that defined the morning, overtaking every topic trending on X and TikTok. 5 by noon, TMZ had secured backstage footage of Mark's exit jaw tight, muttering F and media snakes under his breath. Popcray posted a supercut of the clash, and within hours it had over 5 million views. Fans were divided. Half said Mark had been baited, ambushed by an elitist media narrative. The other half called him fragile, unable to handle basic accountability. Hashtag Wahlberg meltdown and hashtag George wins started trending simultaneously. The View dissected the confrontation that afternoon. Joy Behar laughing, Mark's mad that someone asked him a real question for once. Fox News invited him to do a follow-up exclusive to set the record straight. But his PR team issued a short statement. Mark Wahlberg will not tolerate media that twists faith and grit into something shameful. No regrets. GMA released no statement. But sources inside ABC confirmed that Wahlberg had been asked to leave, and the segment was pulled from reruns and streaming. The damage was done, and the legend had begun. Asterisk critics and columnists weighed in by evening. Some framed it as a culture clash, old-school masculinity colliding with modern media values. Others said it was simply a star not used to being held accountable in an age of brand-manufactured authenticity. George, meanwhile, was celebrated by fellow journalists for not backing down. A masterclass in composure, one wrote. He showed that asking tough questions isn't hostility, it's journalism. Faith leaders were mixed. Some applauded Mark's passion. Others were uncomfortable with how he wielded religion as a rhetorical weapon. Memes flooded the internet, Mark turning water into tequila, George holding a halo like a news angel. Every generation seemed to claim the moment for its own discourse, from Gen Z TikTokers to boomer Facebook posters, and still both men remained silent. The world waited for one of them to blink. Asterisk 2 days later, Mark posted an Instagram video from his home gym. No shirt, rosary around his neck, sweat pouring. Just got done with prayers and training, he said. Let the haters talk. I'll keep walking with God. The caption read, "Real faith doesn't fear confrontation." It went viral instantly. Fans cheered. Critics rolled their eyes. But no one could deny that the moment had given Mark something, relevance. Whether good or bad, he was back in the cultural bloodstream. Meanwhile, George continued with GMA like nothing had happened. But off camera, sources say he was surprised not by Mark's anger, but by how personal it had become. He expected pushback, a staffer said, but not that level of raw hostility. ABC quietly decided to increase security for future live interviews. No direct threats had been made, but tensions were high. Asterisk, the aftermath continued to evolve. Mark's movie performed modestly at the box office, but ticket sales spiked after the interview debacle. People wanted to see what all the fuss was about. Meanwhile, analysts noted a wider shift happening. Celebrities were no longer guaranteed softballs, and audiences no longer wanted perfect heroes. They wanted flaws, fire, and real emotion. George became a symbol of quiet confrontation done right. Mark became a symbol of defiant masculinity. For better or worse, Hollywood executives watched the whole saga with alarm. This wasn't just a PR hiccup, one insider said. It was a collision of worldviews, and no one left clean. Faith communities began debating whether Mark had elevated the conversation or reduced it to shouting. It was no longer just about one interview, it was a national Rorschach test. Asterisk weeks later, at a press junket in Texas, Mark finally spoke candidly. "I don't regret walking off," he said. "If you invite me to talk, don't trap me. I'm not some puppet for your agenda. I'm a man, a father, a believer. I've made mistakes, and I've risen above them. That's my story." Reporters asked if he'd sit with George again. Mark smirked. "Nah, I don't do reruns." George, for his part, never addressed the incident on air. But he was overheard at a charity gala saying, "We ask questions. Some people aren't used to that anymore." The quote made its way to print. The tension between them never cooled. But it became part of the fabric of media lore, a battle between the faith-forged self and the cool hand of inquiry. Asterisk, and so. What began as a morning show promo ended as a pop culture showdown. Feud, but a moment of raw authenticity that no PR team could reverse. It reminded the world that even in the age of image control, true conflict can still break through. Mark Wahlberg walked off live TV but walked into a larger conversation about ego, faith, and accountability. George Stephanopoulos sat still but made waves that rippled far beyond the GMA set. And in the end, audiences were left asking themselves who was right, who was real. And maybe that was the real victory, not in humiliation, but in revealing just how fragile the masks of media can be.